Everybody hear me?
Good morning.
Good morning. Hey, good to have you here. All right.
Welcome. Look, I'm glad to be back.
Yeah. We should have 3 people in this class.
That's
So,
all we got is 3?
yeah. All we got is 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is going to be a good term then.
Here we go. Yeah. Let's see here.
Well, Belser's here.
Oh, good, good. Okay, so let's
That's what I was laughing at. It said it's only 3 of us. I'm here.
yeah. Yep. Let's see here. Share my screen. Let's see. Why is it not letting me do that? Bum, bum, bum. Let's see. Share screen, there we go. Desktop to share that. There we are. All right. Okay. All right. We'll wait for people to get here. But in the meantime, we'll go through the way this course is set up, okay, is that you have a textbook, which I emailed you, and you're going to have PowerPoints that track the lecture, and I posted those, and I also sent them to you the other night, last night. And then you're going to have a series of projects and assignments in order to complete your grade, and then there's going to be a total of 3 exams, okay, exam 1, exam 2, and a final, all right? Your attendance is part of your grade as well, and then you've got projects, the disease project, which is due the last week of class, okay? The schedule is here. This is the syllabus, okay? So if you ever are concerned about whether or not something is due, okay, you check out the syllabus and that'll tell you, okay? So you can see week 1, that's today, all right? We're going to be going through the organization of the class and where the materials are located. We'll have a lecture over our first chapter, and then we're going to have a disease project, which I sent you guys the outline of, and that's due in week 8, okay? So you can see the weeks and the days and the dates for each of these, okay?
Mr. Commerce, real quick.
Yes.
For the disease project, you say it's due on October 1st. I just seen that, and I'm looking at the syllabus, and it says due 9/24. Which one is right?
It's week 8. Week 8.
Okay.
So it should be 9/24. Is it where you seeing
in the email, it states to me that it's due on October 1st.
Oh, okay. All right. No, that should be 9/24. I'll issue a correction.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Just making sure.
Yeah. Okay. And then the following week, we're going to be going into renal disorders we're going to be going into discussion of fats and carbs and where you get them from and what they're used for in your body. And then we're going to get your first homework, which is function of fats, and that's due Thursday, 8/20. Okay. And then we're going to move into cardiovascular disorders and proteins the following week. You're going to get your second homework on proteins, and I'm going to get you a review for exam 1, which is going to be in week 4. Okay, so that's posted. That'll pop up on the website, but I'll send it to you too. And it's basically questions like the ones that you're going to have in the actual exam. And the idea is that it comes with a key, So you take that exam, you check your answers against the key, and any questions you have, you get with me during office hours, which is going to be on Fridays from 5 to 7. And I can do that by Zoom, or I can do that by cell, or whatever you like. Okay. We're not able to come to campus because of the COVID restrictions. Following week, week 4, you're going to have your first exam, and that'll be up the entire week. That'll be due. Um, it'll pop up on that Thursday, but it'll be due Sunday night, 11:30. Okay, so you got from that Thursday to Sunday night to get it done, but it is timed. Okay, so it's set up for a minute and a half of questions. So you don't want to take a long time trying to answer the questions because it'll time out on you and it'll submit. Okay, so just be aware that once you're ready to take the exam, you gotta go ahead, get in there and take it. Okay. We'll talk about ingestion, digestion, absorption, and metabolism that week. And then following week, we're going to have GI and renal disorders. So we're going to talk about your digestive system and your urinary system and the diseases that hit that and how you're going to make dietary changes to adjust for that. And then we're going to have a practice for exam 2, which will be posted that week and which I'll send you in the email. Okay. And then the following week, we're going to be doing vitamins. All right. And you'll have the exam 2. Again, that's over weeks 3 through 5 material. And you're going to have a practice exam to prepare for that. Okay. Same way as for exam 1. And then you're going to get your third homework over vitamins, which is due week 7. Okay. And then week 7, we're going to do electrolytes, water, and minerals. And then we're going to have, let's see here, for the assignment, your MyPlate assignment. Okay. And that'll be due the following week. Okay. And then following week, we're going to have guidelines for healthy eating and the cultural, ethnic, and religious influences on eating and nutrition across the lifespan. And then you're going to get your 4th homework assignment. Your disease project is due that week. This is week 8. And then we'll get ready for, we're not going to do an exam 3. We'll get ready for the final exam. Okay. So what we'll have here is we'll have review for the final exam. And then we'll follow that up the next week with discussion of diabetes and parenteral nutrition, which is basically nutrition through an IV. Okay. And then literature, you're going to have an assignment on diabetes, which will be due the following week. I'll send that to you and I'll post it. And then we'll continue review for the final. Okay. I'll have a PowerPoint up that goes through the important stuff for the final exam. You'll also have a practice exam for the final. And then the last week, your diabetes assignment is due. And then we're going to have maybe some review before the exam if we didn't cover it in the previous week. And then that exam will be due that Sunday night. Okay. And then that'll be the end of the class. That'll be the whole 9 yards. So my tutoring time, which is from 5 to 7, is for this course, but also any course that you happen to be taking. Okay. So the idea here is that if you have a question about something related to a science or a math course, you can use me for those 2 hours and I can help you out. Okay. So that's my time available for you. Okay. We're going to go over here to attendance, which should be quick. All right. So we got here and got 6. There we go. And we got Kalia and Saniqua.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It's Kiila.
Oh, Kiila, sorry.
Kia.
Yeah, you always got to help me with those. And there's Sonequa. I
Yep.
don't know where Raynacia is. Does anybody know Raynacia Burke?
No.
No?
No.
Okay.
No,
All
sir.
right. All right. So we'll hold on to that for now. And we want to go into our first discussion, which is nutrition. Okay. So let's pull that up.
So, Mr. Converse, I see that it say online from now till the 17th. So would that be like the whole semester, or will we be coming back on campus on the 17th?
The 17th of what?
September.
September. I don't know what the situation is going to be in September, to be honest with you.
Okay.
So I think we're in a holding pattern as far as that goes.
Gotcha.
So we'll see, you know. But right now, um, I don't remember any plans to come back on campus live yet.
Okay.
Okay. But if that changes, of course, we'll let you know, and then we'll have a room and we'll actually see each other in person. But you'll have to mask up and take precautions.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So, want to talk about nutrition and why it's important. And what we have to remember about food, right, is that the reason we eat food is really two reasons, right? One is to get energy so the body can do its work. And then the other is for building blocks to put the body together. Okay. Um, the energy that's used to do work is in the form of a chemical that's called ATP, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Okay. But the building blocks are basically the pieces of what you eat that make up your entire body structure. Okay. You're made up of fats and proteins and carbohydrates and also special molecules like nucleic acids and phospholipids and minerals such as calcium phosphate. Um, and basically, when you eat, what happens is that you break down that stuff. The stuff that's going to be used to put you together gets absorbed into the bloodstream or into a liquid that's called lymph. Okay, and then the energy that comes out of what you absorb is used to put those building blocks together in order to assemble the body. Okay, and that's what nutrition is all about. So nutrients are chemical substances that are supplied by food and needed for growth, maintenance, repair of the body. Okay. And you can see the main players here, right? Carbohydrates include things like bread, pasta, and sweets. Some examples of fats include oils and butter. Proteins you get from meat, poultry, fish, and some beans and soy. Minerals include things like calcium, sodium, phosphorus, iron. Minerals come in two categories, either fat or water soluble. The fat soluble vitamins are A, D, E, and K, and the water soluble vitamins are vitamin C and the B complex vitamin. And then the most important one, makes it all possible, is water, right? Because it's a liquid, okay? And you have to have a liquid environment in order for chemical reactions to happen. And chemical reactions are what let the body function. And chemical reactions can't happen without movement, okay? Basically, the way a chemical reaction occurs is that two things bump into each other and then they rearrange how they're connected to each other. And then that new thing goes off and is going to do some kind of a job, okay? If there's no movement, there's no collisions, which means there's no chemistry, right? Which is why you either have to have a gaseous or a liquid environment for chemistry to happen. And in our body, it's the water that does that, okay? The water also is a participant in and a product of a lot of chemical reactions. So it can be consumed or it can be produced in chemical reactions. The water in our body helps maintain our body temperature. And it's also an important part of things like blood and lymph and sweat and saliva, and mucus, and something called interstitial fluid and cytoplasm. Okay, all that has a big water content in it. Okay, actually, most of your body's weight is made up of water. Okay, that's why there's no life without water. So, nutrients provide a source of energy or heat. You get those from your carbs, your fats, and your proteins. They support the growth and the maintenance of tissue, and that includes water, proteins, fats, and minerals. And they regulate body processes, and those include vitamins, minerals, and proteins, as well as they put in here fiber, which is actually a carbohydrate, but it's one that we're not able to digest, okay, because we don't have the chemical means to break it down. So it passes through our digestive system until it gets to our colon, where the bacteria that live in there use it for fuel, and in turn they give us things that our body needs, like vitamin K and the B complex vitamins. And the fiber also helps to allow the material in the digestive tract to move through easily, okay? So it makes you what you call regular. And that's one of the problems you run into as you get older, is that the movement of the material through the digestive system slows down. And so you need more fiber in your diet, because that pulls water into your stool, and that makes it easier for you to pass, okay? It makes it easier for you to do defecation, and that keeps the entire system flowing, okay? Which is why if you look in the medicine cabinet of anybody over the age of 55, you're going to find a fiber supplement or Metamucil, or if you look in the fridge, you're going to see fruit juice or prune juice, because those things are high in fiber, okay? It's also a good way to diet. If you put a lot of fiber in your diet, it's a good way to lose weight, because the fiber doesn't have really any calories associated with it. And the way that we gain weight is that we eat more calories than we burn. And when that happens, the weight gets accumulated in the body as fat, okay? Whereas if you burn more calories than you eat, then you'll lose weight, and you'll stay generally away from conditions like obesity, which are bad for you because they put you at risk for things like cardiovascular disease. So digestion is the mechanism we use to take what we eat and then turn it into a form that can be loaded into the blood. And then once it's in the blood, it can go to the liver, and then the liver can store the nutrients for later as fat or as something called glycogen, or it can release those nutrients to the bloodstream and let them go to the tissues of your body, and they use them for building blocks and for energy, okay? So that's the idea behind why we have to eat. We have to eat to live. We are what we eat, right? What we consume is what makes up our body, and the energy to put that stuff together is also provided by our diet, okay? So in the digestive system, what happens is that we mechanically and chemically break down what's in our diet so that we're able to load it into the bloodstream, right? Y'all know, for instance, that if you eat a Big Mac, you have to turn it into its smallest component parts to get it into the bloodstream. If you try to take a Big Mac and shove it right into one of your arteries, that wouldn't work, right? That wouldn't be usable energy or building blocks for the tissues in your body, because those pieces aren't tiny enough for our body to use. So what happens in the digestive system is that we mechanically crush it, mix it, swirl it around, and then we chemically break it down. We use proteins called enzymes to turn big molecules into tiny ones, and ultimately into the tiniest molecules that can go into the blood. So we convert proteins into their building blocks called amino acids. We convert complex carbohydrates into their building blocks called monosaccharides, or sometimes called simple sugars. and then we turn fats into fatty acids and glycerol. The monosaccharides and the amino acids go into the bloodstream and into the liver, while the lipids in our diet, the fatty acids and the glycerol, they actually go into something called the lymphatic system, and they rejoin the bloodstream at a blood vessel up near your collarbone, which is called the subclavian vein. And then from there, they make a trip to the tissues of the body and then back ultimately to the liver. Okay, so it's important that we understand that if we didn't have a digestive system, we wouldn't be able to take advantage of the building blocks and the nutrients in our diet, right? The digestive system is unusual in that it's one of the body systems that's open to the outside world at both ends, right? Your nose and your mouth lead into your throat, and the whole system ends down by your rectum and your anus. And because of that, there are things in the environment called pathogens that can get in there and sometimes can make you sick, like bacteria and fungi and parasites. And in order to protect the digestive system from that, it's lined with something called a mucous membrane, which is basically a tissue that secretes a sticky liquid called mucus, which traps these guys and flushes them out of the system so they don't get a chance to get into your bloodstream very easily. Okay, so let's take a look at the digestive system and the organs of digestion.
The primary functions of the digestive system are the breakdown of food, called digestion, and absorption of nutrients. Digestion begins in the mouth, where the teeth break food into smaller particles during mastication. Salivary glands located near the oral cavity secrete saliva, which begins chemical digestion and keeps the food moist. As food is swallowed, the soft palate blocks the upper pharynx to prevent food from entering the nasal cavity, and multiple voluntary muscles in the face, neck, and tongue contract, pushing food particles through the pharynx. The food passes over the epiglottis, which prevents food entry into the respiratory system, and then into the esophagus, which connects the pharynx to the stomach. The one-way movement of the food mass, now called a bolus, is controlled by wave-like involuntary muscle contractions. This movement is known as peristalsis. The bolus now enters the stomach. Folds in the stomach wall, called rugae, allow for expansion as the stomach fills. Stomach cells secrete hydrochloric acid, pepsinogen, and various regulatory hormones that chemically digest the bolus. Muscular contractions in the stomach churn its contents to further break down the bolus and mix it with stomach secretions to form a thick liquid called chyme. Chyme exits the stomach through the pyloric sphincter and enters the small intestine, the major site of nutrient absorption. The small intestine consists of three parts: the duodenum, jejunum, and ileum. Bile from the liver and digestive enzymes from the pancreas empty into the duodenum to aid in digestion. Absorbed nutrients pass from the lumen of the small intestine into blood and lymph. Chyme not absorbed in the small intestine enters the large intestine. As it passes through the cecum and ascending, transverse, descending, and sigmoid colon, water and salts are absorbed and chyme is converted into feces. The rectum stores feces until nervous stimulation initiates the defecation reflex, resulting in elimination through the anal canal.
So what you're seeing there, okay, is a system designed to both mechanically and chemically break down the food, and they help each other out by mechanically mixing and chewing and churning the food. We break it into smaller particles, and that makes it easier for the enzymes, which are secreted by things like the pancreas and the salivary glands and the stomach and the lining of the small intestine. to work on those tiny particles and turn them into those tiniest building blocks, which can then be absorbed across the lining of the digestive system and then into the bloodstream. Okay. So if you don't have one, really the other won't work very well. Now, we are made up mostly of molecules that contain the element carbon. Okay. So these are called organic molecules. An organic molecule is any molecule that contains both carbon and hydrogen in it. Okay. We'll learn more about chemistry, I think, next week. But you can think of carbon as like a building block, the ultimate Lego piece, okay? Because carbon can do something with other elements that very few elements can pull off, which is that it can form rings and chains with itself, which means you can build a lot of interesting stuff using carbon as a building block, okay? So examples of important molecules that contain carbon that allow life to happen include amino acids, which make up proteins, nucleic acids, which make up information molecules like DNA and RNA, fatty acids and glycerol, which make up triglycerides, which are used to build things like cell membranes and are also used to store energy, okay? And then carbohydrates, like complex carbohydrates or simple sugars, which are used as the backbone of DNA and RNA. They're used to store energy in the body in the form of glycogen. And they're also used on the surface of the cells of our body as ID tags to indicate whether the immune system should ignore or attack a cell in a tissue, depending on whether or not it's infected, okay? And when cells get infected, a lot of times what happens is that those sugars that are on the surface, they change, okay? And that indicates that there's something wrong with the cell, and our immune system moves in and tries to wipe it out, okay? Carbon, when it's in a molecule, shares electrons with other non-metals, okay? And they form connections that are called covalent bonds, all right? Carbon can form 4 covalent bonds with other non-metals, and it's unique to living systems and is the backbone of carbs and lipids, proteins, nucleic acids, and a lot of these molecules are polymers. So a polymer is a lot like a chain. You've seen a chain with links in it. And a chemical chain is just repeating chemical units hooked together over and over and over again, okay? Proteins are polymers of amino acids. Nucleic acids are polymers of nucleotides. Complex carbohydrates are polymers of simple sugars, okay? And that's just to name a few. The links in the chain of the polymer are called monomers. Those are the building blocks. And they get put together by dehydration synthesis, where you take 2 monomers and you form a new chemical connection between them by removing the equivalent of a water molecule. And they're broken down by hydrolysis reactions, where you take the chain and then you use a water molecule as a way to split off parts of that chain so that you can use it for other things, okay? The dehydration synthesis reactions are going to use energy to happen. They don't happen on their own. While the hydrolysis reactions are more spontaneous, meaning it's easier for them to happen, okay? So the dehydration synthesis reactions are called anabolic reactions. Anabolic means to build up, okay? So we take little pieces and we build them up into something bigger, and we need energy to do that. While the hydrolysis reactions are called catabolic reactions, and they break big things down. And when that happens, energy comes out, and we use that energy to do the building reactions, okay? So this is ultimately one of the main reasons that we have to eat, right? Which is that we have to get the energy from the chemical bonds in our food. By cracking those chemical bonds, the energy gets released and we can take it, we can steal it, and then we can use that to do work, okay? So carbohydrates are made up of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, okay? And the main function of carbohydrates is energy, okay? The average minimum amount of carbohydrates needed to fuel the brain is 130 grams a day, and that's because our nervous system, which is our brain, our brainstem, and our spinal cord, is going to operate exclusively on sugars. That's its only fuel that it can use, okay? Other body systems can use other things. Median carbohydrate intake is about 300 grams a day in men 20 and older, and 256 grams a day in women in the same age range. And the reason for the difference is that women are generally smaller. The acceptable macronutrient distribution range, or AMDR, for carbohydrates is between 45 to 65% of your calories. So what does that mean? Well, if you go over that, then you're taking in too many calories and you might gain weight. And if you go under that, you don't have enough carb in your diet really to let all the body systems do their work right, okay? You're low, for instance, on brain fuel, okay? So you got to keep it within that window in order to stay healthy, okay? Carbohydrates give us energy for cellular work. They regulate protein and fat breakdown and buildup, and they're critical for normal cardiac and central nervous system functioning, okay? What we eat is part of what we call our physical needs, right? And they include oxygen, shelter, water, sleep, rest, and clothing, okay? And an American psychologist named Maslow was able to sort of put this in the hierarchy of needs, and nutrition, right, was near the top of one of those physical needs, okay? Types of carbohydrates in our diet include monosaccharides, polysaccharides, and disaccharides, okay? Monosaccharide is just a simple sugar, okay? Examples include things like glucose and fructose. Glucose is blood sugar. It's the energy form of carbohydrate in our blood that cells use to make energy. Fructose is fruit sugar, and you get that from things like citrus fruits and apples and so on. And then galactose, which is another simple sugar, and you can get that from other plant sources, okay? They're all monosaccharides. They all have 6 carbons in them, the ones listed here, but they're connected to each other in slightly different order. And so we call those isomers of each other, okay? Disaccharides include things like sucrose, lactose, and maltose. Generally, sucrose, that's table sugar. Lactose is the sugar that you see in milk. And maltose is basically a disaccharide of glucose that you get from breaking down things like starch, okay, which is a fuel storage molecule that you have in plants like rice and potatoes, okay? And then polysaccharides are longer chains of these simple sugars, and they include starch, which is basically a plant food storage mechanism, glycogen, which is one of our food storage mechanisms in our body. Our liver and our muscle can make glycogen, which is basically, again, chains of carbohydrates. And then fiber, which is a glucose polysaccharide, also known as cellulose, also known as wood, okay? And that's a form of polysaccharide that we cannot digest, but the bacteria in our colon can, okay? So you can see here some examples. This is from your textbook of different carbohydrates and where they come from, okay? And what they're for, okay? So this is a good slide to kind of star and note, okay? This is good test question material, right? The liver is a big reddish brown organ in the upper right quadrant of your abdomen, okay? And it's critical to our body's function. If your liver shuts down, you'll die, okay? One of the things that the liver does is it converts fructose and galactose into glucose, which is blood sugar, and then it puts that into the blood, and that raises blood sugar levels, and that causes insulin to be released from the pancreas. Insulin is a hormone that tells the cells in our body to take the sugar out of the blood so it can be used for energy, okay? So that's sort of like the signal telling you that the food is here, like the dinner bell for the cells, okay? The body digests 95% of starch within 1 to 4 hours after ingestion. Digestion occurs mainly in the small intestine using pancreatic amylase, which breaks down starch to reduce complex carbohydrates into disaccharides. So it's just a fancy way of saying that when you eat starch in your small intestine, okay, there's an enzyme that chops it into tinier pieces, okay, and those tiny pieces, those disaccharides, will eventually be broken down into glucose and absorbed into the blood. Glycogen is stored carbohydrate energy made in the liver and in the muscle. It's a backup store of energy, but it's only available in limited supply. The main way that the body stores energy is through the storage of fat, okay? And the reason for that is that fat has more calories per gram than any other molecule that we use in our diet for food, okay? And so with fat, what you get is a molecule that has a lot of calories in it, but also a molecule that doesn't like to associate with water. So we call it hydrophobic. So when your body stores fat, it can store a lot of calories in a tinier space, and that's kind of like your body's pantry, okay? So that's what your body goes to when you need fuel between meals, is it goes to your fat stores and it burns them and turns them into sugar, and then your tissues in your body use that for energy, okay? If we tried to store all of our energy as glycogen, we would be enormous, because glycogen requires water in order to be available to the body as a fuel source. And so it wouldn't be a practical method for storing lots of energy in our diet. In addition, the fat in our body insulates us from temperature change and pads and protects our internal organs. Okay, so that's why the body uses fat and not glycogen. To help keep your glucose levels within a good range between meals, glucose is released through the breakdown of glycogen, and that's under the control of a hormone from the pancreas called glucagon, okay? So glucagon is what we call a hyperglycemic hormone, because it tells the body to bust up your fat and your glycogen and turn that into sugar and load that into the blood. And it makes your sugar levels go up. And insulin is called a hypoglycemic hormone, because when the insulin is produced, the cells and the tissues in your body pull the sugar out of the blood and use it for fuel, okay? Digestible carbs provide 4 calories per gram of energy. Now, what's a calorie? It's just literally, it's the amount of heat needed to raise a kilogram of water 1 degree centigrade, which means it's a certain amount of heat, okay? Basically, it's an indication of how much energy is in that molecule. So the more energy you have, the more calories you're going to have. The more calories you're going to have, the more energy you get out of eating that particular item, okay? So something that's high in calories is going to be useful in allowing the body to do its work. The problem is that if you eat more calories than you burn, you'll store a lot of extra body fat, and that'll make you unhealthy. And that's a condition called obesity. Okay? Now, fiber is a type of carbohydrate that is made in plants. You know, fiber better as wood or paper, okay? And we don't have the ability to chemically break it down. So when we eat stuff with fiber in it, and that comes mostly from our vegetables and our fruits in our diet, it passes all the way through our digestive system and out the other end without becoming calories in our body. Okay, the only place that the fiber really gets broken down in our digestive system is by the bacteria in our colon that use the fiber for food, because they are able to break down fiber and turn it into sugars and use that for energy. Okay, the main bacteria that lives in our colon is called E. coli, and it's beneficial to us because those bacteria produce things that we need, while at the same time utilizing our waste products as a way to get their nutrition. Okay, examples of dietary fiber include things like pectin, gum, cellulose, and oligosaccharides. It's important for proper bowel movement, proper elimination of stool, because it adds bulk to the feces, because it pulls water in by osmosis from the tissues surrounding the colon. Okay, it also stimulates peristalsis, which are muscle contractions in the digestive system that push the food through it, and then makes it easier to eliminate it, right? Studies show fiber helps to lower cholesterol and reduce the incidence of intestinal cancer. So in a way, it kind of acts like a scrub brush to get that stuff out of your system. Total fiber recommendations: 25 grams a day for women, 38 grams a day for men. Okay, and that's again because men are bigger. Okay. Fats are broken into triglycerides, phospholipids, sterols. Okay. All fats are lipid soluble, meaning they dissolve more easily in things like oil or grease, things that don't mix with water. Okay. Triglycerides are made up of 3 fatty acids attached to a backbone of glycerol. Phospholipids, which are the building blocks of cell membranes, are made from triglycerides attached to a phosphate, which has a negative electrical charge on it. And so that makes an unusual molecule that has a hydrophobic end and a hydrophilic end. We call that molecule an amphipathic molecule. And that's used to make cell membranes, because that allows us to produce a bilayer of phospholipids with the hydrophobic part in the middle and the hydrophilic part on the edges. And that allows the cells in the tissues of our body to only let certain things through, which are the things that it needs in order to survive. So that's called a semi-permeable membrane. Okay? Sterols are an alcohol with a fused ring system. Examples of sterols include things like cholesterol, which you get from your meat and your dairy, and certain hormones like testosterone or estrogen or progesterone or cortisone or cortisol. Okay, and those are chemical signals used by the body to coordinate the activity of our body systems in the form of what are called hormones. Okay, so in the triglycerides that are in our diet, right, we can have either saturated or unsaturated fatty acids. Okay, a saturated fatty acid is going to have more calories in it because it has more carbon-hydrogen bonds in it. Okay, basically in an organic molecule, to determine the amount of calories in that molecule, you just count the number of carbon-hydrogen bonds, and the more of them that there are, the more calories there are going to be in that molecule. Okay, while an unsaturated fatty acid has fewer carbon-hydrogen bonds. Okay, and as a result is considered to be heart healthy and safer to cook with, because it doesn't promote cardiovascular disease. Okay, one of the problems with eating a high-calorie, high-fat diet is that you get a lot of cholesterol and triglycerides traveling around in your blood, and they can they can collect on the walls of the arteries, which carry blood away from the heart to your tissues, and that can cause the blood flow to be reduced, and that can cause high blood pressure, hypertension, and that can also increase the likelihood that the blood will clot, and that can produce an embolus, which is a traveling clot, and if it gets lodged in your brain, that can cause a stroke, or if it gets lodged in your heart, that can cause a heart attack, okay? And so this is one of the main problems in the US today, which is an epidemic of cardiovascular disease because we have an epidemic of obesity. And the reason for that is that it's very easy with our diet to eat more calories than we can burn, okay? And the result is that we get heavy. You can see an example of a triglyceride here, okay? It contains carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. It's insoluble in water, so we call it hydrophobic, okay? And these include neutral fats, phospholipids, steroids, and eicosanoids, okay? And this is just a little bit on how you make a triglyceride.
Butter, lard, margarine, and salad oil are composed of lipids called fats. To make a fat molecule, 3 fatty acids bind to a molecule of glycerol. For this reason, fat molecules are technically called triglycerides. Fat molecules do not mix with water because they have 3 long hydrocarbon tails. Cells use fats for energy storage because the tails hold more potential energy than other biological molecules.
So you can see here in this drawing, see all these carbon-hydrogen bonds? That represents lots of energy, okay? And that's why there's lots of calories in this kind of a molecule. The part here that's in yellow is the part that's hydrophobic, okay? The part that doesn't like to associate with water. So it likes to associate with other fats, other oils, and so on, okay? And this part over here is the hydrophilic part. It's the part that likes to associate with water. So this is an example of an amphipathic molecule. This is the greasy or hydrophobic part, and this is the hydrophilic part, okay? So it has 2 different sets of chemical characteristics in the same molecule because it's kind of big, okay? Saturated fatty acids are made up of single covalent bonds between carbon atoms, and as a result, they have a lot of carbon-hydrogen bonds and a lot of calories. They tend to be solids at room temperature because those fatty acid tails stack real well. And those include things like lard and butter, Crisco, okay? Unsaturated fatty acids have double bonds between some of the carbon atoms. So instead of 1 connection between 2 carbon atoms, there's 2, which means that there's fewer carbon-hydrogen bonds. And as a result, those fatty acid tails don't stack as easily because those double bonds produce little kinks in the chain. And those are liquids at room temperature. And those include things like oils we get from things like plants, okay? Trans fats are modified oils. They tend to be saturated, and so they're going to promote cardiovascular disease, so they're unhealthy. While omega-3 fatty acids in triglycerides are heart healthy, okay, because of the double bonds and the fewer calories, okay. Sterols are found in the tissues of animals and aren't an essential nutrient because the liver can make them from other things. But if we eat cholesterol in excess, you're going to promote cardiovascular disease, okay. And so there's an example of what a sterol or a steroid looks like, okay? This is a drawing of it. Each of these little bends in this ring represents a carbon atom with 2 hydrogens attached to it. And all these rings are fused together. And then these are, again, CH2 groups, all right? So most of this is made up of carbon and hydrogen, okay? And anytime you see mostly carbon and hydrogen in an organic molecule, that region of the molecule or that whole molecule is going to be hydrophobic, okay? Meaning it's going to tend to want to associate with other hydrophobic molecules, okay, because of energy considerations. It's greasy, it's oily, okay. Steroids have this kind of structure. Examples include things like vitamin D, steroid hormones, and bile salts. And cholesterol is the building block for all of this, which we get mostly from our meat, from our dairy, okay? So we use cholesterol in our diet to make things like testosterone and estrogen and aldosterone and cortisone, okay? And we also use the cholesterol kind of like a doorstop in a cell membrane to make the membrane move a little bit less. And there are reasons that the cell needs to do that sometimes in order for it to function. It needs certain regions of the cell membrane to kind of stay still. And so the cholesterol sort of acts like a doorstop. Okay? The AMDR for fats is 20 to 35% of your total calories. 10% or less of your total calories should come from saturated fat. And that's because of the high calorie content. And you should eliminate cholesterol, or at least hold it to low levels like 200 to 300 milligrams daily. A high-fat diet is going to promote cardiovascular disease, hypertension, and type 2 diabetes, okay, which is where the body makes so much insulin for so long that your cells quit paying attention to it, and that causes your blood sugar levels to go way up. And that has all kinds of negative effects on the body, okay? The exception is for children under 2. We need a high amount of fat for brain tissue because the brain makes something called myelin, central nervous system, and the entire nervous system really use myelin as a way of insulating nerve fibers so that the nervous system can work properly, okay? An adult diet with less than 10% fat can't supply adequate amounts of essential fatty acids and can result in a condition known as cachexia, where the person just looks like skin and bones, okay? And you often see that, for instance, in cancer patients, because the cancer is literally pulling nutrients out of the blood to feed itself at the expense of the patient. And as a result, their fat stores virtually vanish. Okay? The majority of lipid metabolism happens after the fat gets to the small intestine. What will happen there is that the gallbladder and the pancreas will release material into the small intestine. The gallbladder releases bile, and the pancreas releases bicarbonate and enzymes. The bile is an emulsifying agent, so it acts like a detergent, just like Dawn lifts grease off of your dishes. The bile breaks the fat up in your small intestine, and it makes it easier for the enzymes that break down the fat, called lipases, to do their job. Okay, and so that's an example of how chemical and mechanical digestion work together. Okay. Fat should be 20 to 35% of your total calories, right? Intestinal cells absorb the majority of the end products of digestion, with some being lost in the feces. VLDLs are in the blood to carry triglycerides to your tissues. LDLs carry cholesterol to tissues, and HDLs basically are going to remove extra cholesterol from the cells and move it to the liver so the liver can get rid of it. Lipids provide about 9 calories per gram of energy and are the densest form of stored energy. Okay, so when you have your blood work done and they talk to you about your cholesterol, you're going to have healthy cholesterol and triglyceride levels if these HDLs are high and these other guys are low, because that means that you're keeping the amount of fat you're taking in low, and as a result, you're not likely to get plaque on your arteries, and you're going to be healthier longer, okay? Whereas if these guys are high, that means that you're taking in more fat that you're burning, and the likelihood that you're going to get plaque is going to go up, okay? Now, proteins are the workhorses of the body, They are tools of life used to do the jobs that keep you functioning, okay? And the reason that proteins can do this is because they're made up of building blocks that are called amino acids, which can be attached to each other in any order, in any length, to build any tool that the body needs to do a particular job, okay? They're made up of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen. Sometimes they're going to have sulfur and phosphorus in them too. The amino acids that make up the polypeptide get that name because they have an amine group, which is a nitrogen containing group, and an acid group, which is a carboxylic acid group. And we'll look at what those are in a bit. They're all identical to each other with the exception of the R group, which is in the center of the amino acid, and it can either be a collection of atoms that's nonpolar or polar or charged, okay? And as a result, when you put together a polypeptide, what you get is a collection of amino acids attached to each other. Some of them are nonpolar, some of them are polar, some of them are charged. And what will happen is that long chain will begin to fold up onto itself into what's called its native conformation, which is the shape in which it can do its job. And that's driven by the nonpolar amino acids trying to find each other, the charged amino acids trying to find amino acids of the opposite charge, and the polar amino acids either looking for each other or looking for water, okay? And what will happen is it'll take on a particular shape in which it can do its function, okay? There are all kinds of different proteins. Fibrous proteins tend to be water insoluble and stable. They have both tertiary and quaternary structure, which means that they have an overall shape to them made up of multiple polypeptide chains, but each chain also has a shape to it as well, okay? They provide mechanical support and strength. Examples include things like keratin and collagen, okay? While globular proteins are smaller, they're more spherically shaped, and they can have tertiary and quaternary structure. Their main job is to be hormones and antibodies and enzymes, okay? An antibody is just a protein that protects you from disease, okay, by attacking pathogens. Hormones are chemical signals in the body that coordinate the function of our body systems. And then enzymes are molecules that help chemical reactions happen more quickly, okay? In your diet, you get your protein from all your sources, really. Your vegetables, your meats, your fruits, your grains, okay? Complete protein comes from animal sources, okay? You've heard the saying, you are what you eat. Well, the reason people say that is that we are basically protein, and so we eat protein to break it down and then reassemble it into our proteins, okay? So if you eat meat, you eat animal sources, you get all the amino acids you need to build you, okay? Incomplete protein comes from plant sources. There are certain plant sources that are missing some amino acids and other plant sources that are missing other amino acids. And if you only eat those plant sources, you're going to have problems building the proteins in your body because you're going to be missing some pieces. So what you do in order to fix that problem, if you eat only vegetable sources, is what's called complementary protein, where you mix and match your fruits and your vegetables in order to get all the protein you need to build your body, okay? An example of that would be red beans and rice, okay? The amino acids that the beans are missing are different from the amino acids that the grains are missing. So if you combine them, you end up with complete protein. So it's possible to get complete protein from a vegetarian diet. You just have to be careful, okay? Remember that proteins are the tools of life, okay? And without the tools of life, you will die, all right? So they're important in energy balance and metabolism and tissue building. They support immune function. For Factors that influence the body's requirement for protein. If you're undergoing rapid growth, you're going to need more protein. If you're repairing injury from illness, you're going to need more protein. Okay. The recommended daily allowance is 0.8 gram per kilogram body weight for healthy adults. The AMDR is 10 to 35%. Too little protein leads to protein malnutrition. Examples include kwashiorkor and marasmus, which are disorders you see in a lot of third world countries because of the low protein diet. They have a diet that's basically high in carbohydrates. Okay. Vegan diets can be low in B12 because it doesn't naturally occur in plants. And so you can sometimes take that as a supplement. Okay. And protein provides 4 calories per gram of energy. So on the energy scale, right, the bottom of the scale are proteins. Then you got carbohydrates. And then at the top, you got your fats. And that's per molecule. Okay. So that's one of the reasons why if you want to lose weight, one of the ways to do that is to eat a diet that's high in fiber, which we can't digest, and high in protein. Okay. And the result of that will be that you'll feel fuller longer, but you won't have that big calorie load that can end up as fat and can produce cardiovascular disease. This is an example of kwashiorkor. Okay. It's a form of protein malnutrition. And what you see in these individuals is edema and hepatomegaly, which is a big liver. Okay. And wasting of muscle. All right. And the reason for this is that there's not enough protein in the diet to support life. So what the body does as an emergency is it starts breaking down your body protein. And that's why there's virtually no muscle or connective tissue here. In addition, because of the low protein in the diet, there's very little albumin in the blood, which is a protein that helps the blood hold on to its water. Okay. And without that albumin, that extra fluid is going to end up in the tissues. And that's why you see this distended belly in this child, because of the fluid that's leaked out of the blood vessels in the abdominal pelvic cavity and has accumulated in the abdomen. And that's a condition called ascites. Okay. So this is very common in areas of the world that are prone to famine and poor food supply. Okay. In the developed world, you don't generally see this. Okay. So those are our proteins, right? Our 20 amino acids and our different types of protein. Okay. And our protein considerations. So let's take a break at this point and let's come back not at noon, but let's come back at 1/4 till. So let's say 11:50, okay? And we'll finish up, and we'll also take attendance when we come back to see if anybody else has joined us. Okay.
All righty.
All right. So I'll see you guys in 15. Thank you.
I ain't got to. Yeah, I'm gonna still apply. I don't give a damn. I got a job. I ain't got a paycheck yet.
All right, we're back.
Yes, sir.
All right. So, Tanika,
Yes, I'm still here.
you both. All right. There we go. There we go. And Asha didn't make it in, so now we save it. Print that.
I'm here.
Hey, we got a full class today.
Oh, we do. This Kiala.
Oh,
Yeah.
look, I thought I was our missing person.
Oh,
Mr. Converse, real quick.
Yes, ma'am.
I was given this book. I want to show you real fast. Let me take me off of video. I know I got a cigarette in my hand. Apologies. This, you see this?
Hold on, hold on. Let's see. Let's see if I can see you.
yeah, I got that too.
You got that book? Okay. I just making sure that's part of your material for class, Mr. Commerce. That's all I needed to know.
Let's see.
Wait a minute. Did it go away? Oh, no. I'm still. Where my video at?
I can. You were
Oh,
there.
you did that. Okay. Okay.
You were there. Yeah, I saw the book you got, and remember, I posted 2 books for you as well, on Google.
I got an ATI book too. I don't know if it's the right.
Yeah, you want that one.
Okay, so we do want the workbook because I'm able to keep up with you with your lectures in the workbook. But as I was going through the nutritional essentials in the first chapter, I said, well, I'll figure that out later. Okay. All right. Making sure.
Yeah, those books, because the book that they assigned to you in the class is it's not real detailed. You know, it's mostly a lot of words and it's kind of short, and it assumes that you've had a nutrition course before.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I put those other 2 books on reserve for you.
I see. All right now.
Yeah. All right. So what we want to do now is talk a little bit about my plate. Okay. Basically, a lot of people would like to eat a balanced diet, but really don't have the time to go into a lot of analysis and prep. And so my plate was developed as a way to kind of make that easier for them to accomplish, okay, by essentially promoting balanced proportions, moderate sizes, and a wide variety of foods, okay? So this is a little discussion of what my plate is about.
Hi, my name is Esty Asher, and I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist and health educator for BJC School Outreach and Youth Development. I travel to classrooms and talk to students about making healthy choices, specifically about nutrition and physical activity. Have you ever wished that you had a useful, easy-to-use tool to help you determine what foods to put on your plate? Well, in 2011, thanks to the United States Department of Agriculture, we do. In 2011, the USDA put out something called My Plate. My Plate is a visual tool that was created in order to help Americans choose healthy foods for their meals and snacks. My Plate came after My Pyramid, which had been around since 1992. Similar to My Pyramid, My Plate includes the different food groups that are essential at building a healthy, balanced diet. Also similar to My Pyramid, the different food groups that are in My Plate are represented by different colors. The different color scheme helps remind us the importance of building a healthy plate that's also colorful. The different colors not only make our foods more visually appealing, but they also correspond to different vitamins and minerals found in our food. So if you have a colorful plate, rest assured you will have a variety of vitamins and minerals as well. There are a few differences between My Pyramid and My Plate that I would like to point out. First, with My Plate, there are 5 food groups instead of 6. Fats and oils are no longer considered to be a food group. That's not because our body doesn't need them, but rather because it has been determined that as Americans, we eat more than enough of the fats and oils in our diet. They're naturally found in many foods, and oftentimes the cooking process that we use include fats and oils already. A second change that they made to My Plate was the group that was formerly called beans and meat is now called protein. And lastly, the milk group is now called dairy. So now what I want to do is talk about each of the different food groups, point out the primary function that they have on our body, and give a few examples of each of those food groups. It's really important for us to notice that each of the food groups does execute a different function in our bodies, so it's really important for us to include all of those food groups as a result. First, we have the fruit group. The fruit group contains vitamins, minerals, and fiber. Specifically, the fruit group helps with our immune system, so it helps our body fight disease, and it also helps maintain healthy skin. There's also fiber in our fruit group, which will help our digestive tract, so keep our digestion good and healthy, and it will also help with our heart, so our circulatory system. Examples I have here, we have an apple, we have some pineapple, we also have some grapefruit and raisins. Dried fruit like raisins are examples of fruit within the fruit group as well. Next, we have the vegetable group. The vegetable group, just like the fruit group, contains vitamins, minerals, and fiber. Specifically, the vegetable group helps with our vision, so it's really important that we want to get those vegetables in. Different vegetables that I have here are the squash, peppers, broccoli, and carrots. Next, we have the grains group. The grains group has fiber as well, but it is also really important for giving our bodies energy. That energy is not only helpful for us to move around and be physically active, But as I point out to my students, it really helps give energy to our brain as well. So it will help us focus better, think better, and study so that we can also have a better academic performance. So examples of grains are some pasta, we have some cereal, some rice, and some bread. Next, we have the protein group. The protein group is really important for helping build our muscle tissue. All tissues in our bodies are helped by the protein group, but specifically we talk about muscle tissue with protein. Protein can be found in both animal and plant-based sources. Animal sources include meat, like in this burger, also some chicken or fish or eggs. Plant sources include nuts, like these almonds, peanut butter, seeds, and those are different plant sources of protein. So if somebody does not eat animal sources, they can meet their protein needs from plant sources exclusively. The last group that we have is the dairy group. The dairy group is made primarily of milk, yogurt, and cheese. If somebody chooses not to have cow's milk or products from animals, we can also use soy milk or almond milk. What makes the dairy group so important is the fact that there is calcium in the dairy group. While milk alternatives such as soy milk and almond milk don't naturally have calcium, the companies have added calcium to make sure that you can get the appropriate amount of calcium from these type of dairy milk products. So that is the last of the 5 food groups that are found on my plate. I hope the next time that you're choosing the foods on your plate, you think of my plate. For more information, visit choosemyplate.gov or bjcschooloutreach.org. Thank you.
So again, this was established as a way to make it easier for you to assemble a balanced diet. And one of your projects is going to be to generate a My Plate. Let's see here. Save as. To generate a My Plate diet or meal, right? And essentially take into account the amount of each food group you're going to include, the calories from each food group, and you'll submit that. And that's, I think, in week 7, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so let's pull this up. Here we go. Oop. All right. Yes. Mm-hmm. There. There we go. Like that. All right. Boom. Boom. Okay. All right. We talked a little bit earlier when we were discussing digestion that you have to have both mechanical and chemical processes in order for digestion to work properly, right? And the mechanical includes things like chewing and swallowing, and peristalsis, which is the pushing of the food through the pipe, and emulsification, which is what the bile does to the fat that drops from the stomach into the small intestine. The chemical digestion happens as a result of enzyme action, and those are produced in our saliva and in our gastric and our pancreatic juice, okay? And it's the combination of those two things that is going to ultimately break the food down to a point where we can absorb it into the blood. Accessory organs of digestion in the oral cavity include the teeth, the tongue, and the salivary glands. That's where all the action begins. And the pharynx and the esophagus is where we do the act of chewing and swallowing, right? So we chew the hard palate, which is at the top of our mouth, and the soft palate keep the food and the liquid from going into our nasal cavity. And then we swallow, and then there's a flap of tissue called the soft palate that blocks access to the nasal cavity. And then there's a flap called the epiglottis that closes over your trachea, okay, and your larynx, so that food doesn't go down your windpipe. And then it goes into a tube called the esophagus that connects your throat to your stomach, okay? And so this is the only voluntary part of digestion, right? You putting the food into your mouth and then you chewing and you swallowing it. After that, the rest of digestion is pretty much on autopilot. So this is a look at how swallowing actually works.
Swallowing, or deglutition, is the process by which food passes from the mouth to the stomach. This movement is controlled by the nervous system and involves both voluntary and involuntary muscle contractions. Before food is swallowed, it is mechanically broken down in the mouth by chewing or mastication. The salivary glands secrete the enzymes lingual lipase and salivary amylase. Salivary amylase begins the chemical breakdown of starch, carbohydrates, in the mouth. The water content of saliva helps bind particles together to form a bolus that can be swallowed. Swallowing occurs in 3 stages. The first is a voluntary phase called the buccal or oral transit phase. Here the tongue moves upwards and backwards against the hard and soft palate to push the bolus into the oropharynx. Next is the pharyngeal stage, in which involuntary movements push the bolus through the pharynx and into the esophagus. Movement of the bolus stimulates receptors in the oropharynx, which send impulses to the deglutition center in the medulla oblongata and the lower pons of the brainstem. The brain signals the soft palate and uvula to close off the nasopharynx, and the epiglottis to seal off the larynx. This prevents the bolus from entering the respiratory tract. The upper esophageal sphincter relaxes to allow the bolus to move into the esophagus and contracts to reduce backflow into the pharynx. In the final esophageal stage, the bolus is pushed onward by peristalsis, a progression of involuntary wave-like contractions of the circular and longitudinal smooth muscles of the esophagus. As the bolus approaches the end of the esophagus, the lower esophageal sphincter relaxes and the bolus moves into the stomach. So, in summary, food moves from the mouth through the oropharynx and esophagus and then into the stomach.
So this is one of the reasons why theoretically you could take a bite out of a hamburger and swallow it and then stand on your head and the food would still go into your stomach because the muscular waves, the peristaltic waves, would still push it toward its next destination, okay? Now your stomach is an interesting place because it's what allows us to do something we take for granted, which is called discontinuous feeding, meaning that we can eat a meal and then be done and then go on with our lives, okay? If we didn't have a stomach, we couldn't do that because we'd have to be eating all the time. And an example of an animal that has no stomach is an earthworm, right? And the life of an earthworm is very simple. They eat dirt and they poop and they make baby earthworms, and that's it, okay? No stomach there at all. The stomach produces gastric juice and mucus, and the gastric juice has acids in it that sterilize the food and also aid the process of protein breakdown, okay? And the mucus protects the stomach from its own acid, so it doesn't eat itself up as quickly, okay? And then there's also muscle in the wall of the stomach that helps to churn all that stuff up, and it turns that food ball, that bolus, into a liquid that's called chyme, which is going to go into the small intestine, which comes off this end of the stomach in an area called the pyloric sphincter, okay, which is a little door that opens out of the stomach to let the liquid out into the intestine. The doorway into the stomach is called the cardiac sphincter, okay, and it lets the food in from the esophagus. Now, your small intestines are important because that's where most of the nutrient absorption happens, right? So it's a pretty long pipe. You're talking about 20 yards or about 20 feet long, okay? And it's broken into the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum. The duodenum is the first part, and it's the shortest. Then the jejunum, and then the ileum is the last part, and that joins up to the colon at the ileocecal valve and dumps into a structure called the cecum, okay? And it's the fact that it's folded up and it's very long is a reflection of the fact that the act of absorption requires a lot of surface area, okay? If you look at the intestine itself, if you look at a cross section of the pipe here, you would find that there are a lot of finger-like extensions out of the walls that are called villi, and they increase the surface area even more. And the result of that is that we can get all the nutrients we need by the time we get through the small intestine. All the stuff required from our meal is now in our bloodstream or in our lymph, and the only stuff that's left are waste products, okay, which are going to end up going into the cecum, this little pouch here, and then up the ascending to the transverse to the descending and the sigmoid colon, and then out the rectum and the anus, okay? So most digestion occurs here, okay, and end product absorption occurs here. That's why your small intestine is really one of the most important parts of your digestive system. The large intestine is designed to reabsorb water from the feces, okay, as well as vitamins that are made by bacterial action that go on there, right? That's the E. coli producing the vitamin K and the B complex vitamins. So that's an example of what they call a symbiotic relationship in biology, where both participants get something out of the deal, right? Think of the phrase, you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. They get a place to live and they get food and we get their byproducts and everybody's happy, okay? We talked about metabolism. Metabolism is just all of the chemical reactions that let the body work, okay? And it's broken down into the anabolic and the catabolic reactions. The catabolic reactions tear big stuff down, and the energy that comes out of that is used to make something called ATP, which is like gas in the tank for living systems. And anabolic reactions take that energy and use that to build you, okay? The large intestines are where water absorption and vitamin absorption take place, okay? There's also mucus produced all along the pipe, and that's to lubricate the pipe, but also to, again, protect from pathogens getting across the lining of the digestive system and into the blood where they could make us sick, okay? The solid waste and the water become feces in the colon. The gaseous waste that we produce is called carbon dioxide, and we lose that primarily through the respiratory system. And then liquid waste from the urine that's produced by the kidneys and stored in the bladder and then eliminated through the urethra. Okay, so what goes in has to come out, right? Now, one of the things you might want to do between now and next Thursday is just write down everything you eat and drink for 3 days. Be honest with yourself. Write down the portion sizes, include all the beverages that you eat, and then in your diary or in your list, see how many calories you ate. Okay, and one of the things you got to be careful about when you do that is that a lot of times when you look at a food label, you'll see two different things, right? You'll see the calories per serving and the servings in the package, right? So if you eat a whole package of something, right, you have to multiply the number of servings in the package by the calories per serving in order to get the total calories that you eat. So the rule of thumb is that you need 2,000 calories a day to maintain your body weight, okay? That's on average. If you take in more than that, you're going to gain weight. You take in less than that, you're going to lose weight. So figure out how many calories you're pulling down, okay, and determine whether you need to make adjustments. And then the other thing that you can do if you want to look at the other end of that is to think about what kind of activities you do during the week, okay, and maybe see how many calories you're burning, all right? And that'll tell you whether you're in a fuel storage mode or whether you're in a fuel burning mode, okay? And that can guide how you do your diet and exercise routine on a daily and on a weekly basis, okay? Now, the website that you guys go to, all the stuff that you're going to need, like for taking the notes here, one of the things you can do, right, as the lecture goes through, is that you can type in these spaces, right, and take notes, right, and it'll, you know, that's one of the ways that help you remember the material, okay. This whole lecture is going to be put up on YouTube, and I'll send you the link to it so you can review it in case you missed anything. And if you have any questions beyond what we do here in class time, you want to get a hold of me between 5 and 7 on Fridays and ask me any questions that you have. Your assignments, they are posted and they will pop on the calendar a week before they're due, okay? But I will also send them to you just in case you have trouble getting to them. And then your grades will be recorded in the grade book as I get those assignments in. Now, when you submit an assignment, what you're going to have to do is email it to me, okay? So as you fill this out, all right, I recommend that you open the PDF files in Adobe Acrobat Reader, okay? So if you're confused on where Adobe Acrobat Reader is, let me show you, okay? All you have to do is type in download Adobe Acrobat Reader in Google, okay? And then it'll take you, it just says right there, go to the download, okay? And then it'll just say download Adobe Acrobat Reader. You just click on that, it'll download into your computer. And then when you open up these things that have form fields in them, you just type in those little fields, okay? And then you save it, right? You go to File and you say Save As, give it a name, and then you just email that form to me, okay? And that way, it'll be easier for me to grade your homework, and you won't have to do things like print it out or any of that stuff, okay? but make sure that you open it in Adobe Acrobat Reader, because if you try to open it in your web browser or Chrome or whatever, it won't work right. Okay, you have to have Adobe Acrobat Reader, and Adobe Acrobat Reader is free. Okay, so you don't need to pay anything to get it, and that makes it easy for you to take notes and easy for you to do your homework. Okay. All right. Do we have any questions before we bump out?
Mr. Converse.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I do. So with these notes, you will be giving us these PowerPoints every week?
Yeah, they're also posted on the website if you go to the documents.
Okay, yeah, because I seen these ones, but I didn't know if you was gonna do it every week. So
yeah, every week. Yeah, they're all posted. They're posted for the whole course, actually. So if you go to the website, all these are already posted, but I will also send them to you.
What website?
Well, so when you go in, there's a website that you go to where your course should be. Let me show you where it is. So you go here, and you go down here, and it's I think it's this one. No, it's not Brightspace. It's
ATA.
Hold on. Find it. Okay. Let's see here. Student portal. Here we go. Yeah. You want to go to my.ata.edu. Okay. And then sign in. And then the course and the materials are all there. Okay. We're not on Brightspace. We are technically a live course. Okay. So that's where all the stuff is stored. So that's where you'll see the calendar. And that's where you'll see the documents. Okay. And you can download all that stuff from there. And like I said, I'll still email you. And that's also where your grades are going to pop up. Okay. Cool.
Yes, sir.
We good? All right. I'll see y'all
next week.
Okie dokie. No, I do got another question. Where you go? Hello?
Yes. I don't think he left.
Oh, here.
Go ahead. I might be able to answer it.
No, I'm here. What's up?
Oh, see, Mr. Commissioner.
Yeah.
So how will we know where our assignments? You gonna send them to me?
They're on the syllabus, and they're also posted in this website. Okay, but I'll send them to you. So I'll send them to you, and you send them back.
All right.
Yeah. So each week when you get that announcement that class is coming, there'll be an attachment, and the attachment will have your assignments. And I also attach stuff to the link of the podcast once I post it online. So
okay.
You get it. So just keep looking at your email, okay? I send it both to your ATA email and your regular email, so check both of them.
Okay.
And you should get what you need. And if you don't, just let me know.
Okay, yeah, here it go. All right.
All right.
There you go. Cool? We good?
Yes, sir.
All right. See y'all next Thursday.
Yes, you will.